Phoenix, 1930, home to 48,000 residents, this small city was the least affected by the stock market crash of 1929. Many Americans were attracted to the cool winters of Phoenix, especially those who had tuberculosis and coped better with dry heat. The rest of the U.S. may remember 1930 as the start of the Depression that affected millions, but Phoenix will recall it as the year the world became aware of the infamous trunk murders.
Winnie Ruth Judd was born on January 29, 1905 in Darlington, Indiana. She was raised there as the oldest child by her mother and her father, who was a minister at a Free Methodist church. At age 18, Ruth first met her husband, 44-year-old Dr. William C. Judd, while working as an assistant in the same hospital. They married a year later in April of 1924. They left in that same year for Mexico. Dr. Judd had an addiction to narcotics, and he had a hard time keeping a job, so he decided to take a job in Mexico. Ruth had tuberculosis since she was a small child, and she hoped that the climate in Mexico would improve her health. However, her health did not improve as planned. She hoped for better luck elsewhere and moved to Phoenix, Arizona by herself, letting her husband stay in Mexico.
In Phoenix, Ruth landed a 6-day-a-week job at Grinnell Clinic where she met Anne Leroy. Anne Leroy was also a new resident of Phoenix. She had grown up in Oregon and, like Ruth, had tuberculosis. Anne lived with her close friend she met in Alaska, Hedvig Sammy Samuelson, who had been a teacher before her tuberculosis made it too difficult for her to work. Unlike Anne, she had never been married. Over the next year, Ruth became very close to the girls and even moved in with them in May of 1931. However, the arrangement did not last long, and she moved back into her own apartment.
While in Phoenix, Ruth also became very close to a powerful man, Jack Halloran, or otherwise known as Happy Jack. Jack Halloran was 44 years old. He was married and had 3 children. He was a very influential businessman and was great friends with many Phoenix politicians through his country club. He also served on the Phoenix Chamber of Commerce. He was a Catholic man who attended St. Mary's Catholic Church and sent his children to Catholic school as well. He lived next to Ruth, and their affair supposedly began in December of 1930. Ruth really liked Jack, but he continued to flirt blatantly with many other women.
October 18, 1931 seemed like a peaceful Sunday for Arizona. It was on this morning that Ruth showed up at the house of her landlords. She kindly asked for assistance in getting her luggage to the train station. She told them that she was going to Los Angeles to visit her husband, who had found a job opportunity there in the past year. Howard Grimm and his son packed Ruth's luggage into their car and gave her a ride down to the train station. When Ruth's luggage reached Los Angeles, baggage man H.J. Mapes immediately knew something was wrong with the large black trunk, and he was almost positive it was leaking blood. He believed that one of the passengers was trying to smuggle deer into California, since that had become a common problem at that time.
A few hours later, Ruth showed up with her younger brother, Burton McKinnell, to claim her trunks. However, baggage agent Anderson questioned her about her bags. He asked her to produce the key for the trunks so he could inspect what was inside. She told the man that her husband had the keys, and after she told him her husband did not answer her call, she said she would go retrieve the keys herself. She never returned. By 4:30, Anderson had called the police. Detective Frank Ryan picked the lock on the trunks to find the body of Anne Leroy stuffed into one of the trunks, and pieces of a body in another. However, not all the pieces were in the trunks. They later found the rest of Ruth's luggage along with the rest of Sammy Samuelson's body.
A massive manhunt was underway to find Ruth Judd. The manhunt continued until October 23rd, when she surrendered her weak, bruised, and starved self to the police at a funeral home in California. Ruth was taken back to Arizona to await her trial. Ruth was represented in court by her 3 defense attorneys, Herman Lukowitz, Joseph Haversack, and Paul Schenck. However, nothing could have prepared them for the botched trial they were about to go through.
Many of the methods that were used to collect evidence in the Judd case would not be nearly acceptable today. The landlords of Winnie's house allowed people to tour it for 10 cents a person before the police had time to collect proper evidence. Blood samples were not collected until November 13th, all 28 days after the murders occurred. Even some of the theories that were presented in court did not support the evidence. The state asserted that the only blood found in the house was in the bedroom, yet Sammy's body was, according to doctors, dismembered shortly after her death, which most likely meant in the bathroom of the house. Also, the state seemed to think that Ruth had killed the girls in their sleep. So why was there only a little blood splatter around Anne's bed and not Sammy's? Where was the blood from Sammy's head wound?
To many people, it seemed obvious that Ruth had killed both of the girls even if they did not believe that it was in cold blood. The question that was on most people's mind was, did she act alone? Sammy's body was cut apart so precisely that it was able to be sewn back together. Many doctors have claimed that to cut a body apart with that much precision, you must have much skill and strength. Winnie lacked both the skill and the strength. Who could have helped her pack the trunks and cut apart Sammy's body?
Ruth was proven guilty for the premeditated murder of Anne Leroy. However, she never went on trial for the murder of Hedvig Samuelson, since it appeared that there might have been an accomplice in her murder. She was given the maximum sentence of the death penalty. It was later found that the jury was talked into giving her that sentence by one of the jurors, Dan Kleinman, who thought they could get her to talk when they sentenced her. However, jurors came forward when it appeared that it hadn't worked, and that Kleinman's true intention was for her to be killed. But the sentencing was not changed. When Ruth finally had her chance to tell the story, the truth came out.
Ruth claimed that she had gotten in a fight with Anne and Sammy over introducing Jack to a girl who had a shameful disease, and she said that they threatened each other with spreading word about each other's misdeeds. She walked to the kitchen, and when she turned around, Sammy came through their breakfast room holding a gun. Ruth then grabbed the gun from Sammy, and they fell to the ground wrestling for the gun. Sammy was still fighting for the gun when it fired into her chest. Anne was screaming at Sammy to shoot Ruth and grabbed an ironing board from behind the kitchen door. As Ruth and Sammy were grappling for the gun, Anne started bludgeoning Ruth on the head with the ironing board. As Anne struck her one last time, Ruth shot her. Ruth woke up between the two bodies and ran out of the house.
Ruth explained to Jack what had happened, and he immediately started the cover-up. He mopped up most of the blood and arranged for the disposal of the bodies. He took Ruth back to the house the following night and told her that Sammy had been operated on and was placed in a trunk that was in the back of the room. He did not specify who had operated on Sammy. Jack instructed her to take the late Saturday night train to Los Angeles, where he would have someone waiting for her, but the trunks were too heavy. This was when she asked for the help of her landlords. She made it to Los Angeles and never expected to be caught.
She told her story while in prison to Sheriff McFadden and finally had the chance to present her story to a jury after being convicted. She convinced the grand jury enough to indict Jack as an accessory to murder. Halloran laughed through the trial and angered Ruth as she spoke on the stand, scoffing at her story. He acted as though the whole trial was a joke. His attorney declared everything that Ruth said was completely false and was only the story of an insane person. Eventually, his attorney asked Judge Niles to dismiss the charges, saying that there was no crime since the indictment was based on the jury claiming that Ruth Judd had killed in self-defense. The judge agreed and dropped all charges on Jack Halloran. That was it for Happy Jack. Most people knew that Jack had been involved, but he went free without any punishment.
In the last-minute effort to avoid her death penalty, Ruth Judd had a sanity hearing and was declared insane. She was transferred to the Arizona State Hospital. She spent over 29 years in this overcrowded hospital serving her sentence. She escaped a total of 7 times. Her last escape, on October 8, 1962, lasted 6.5 years. She restarted her life in California as Marion Ruth Lane. However, Ruth couldn't be free of her sentence for long. She was discovered on June 27, 1969. With the help of her new attorney, Melvin Belly, she had another sanity trial and was proven sane, and after a few more years of waiting, gained her freedom.